Good afternoon on the East Coast, and welcome if you're elsewhere around the world. This is another weekly partner spotlight from XenTegra. We're going to give everybody just a few minutes to get into the room, but welcome and thanks for joining us. We've got our friends from LoginVSI with us today. We've got Blair and we've got Jeff with us. Blair, how's the weather down in Costa Rica?
Weather is fantastic. I see sun every day, see beach every day. We get, a couple inches of rain within a few minutes, just about every day. So it's everything that you might want for a rainforest.
That's got to be
It's
fun,
also
sleeping weather in the afternoon when you get your showers.
Oh
Perfect,
yeah,
perfect kind of
yep.
situation. We'll give everybody just a few more minutes to get into our session and then we'll kick off. Again, we want to welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us for this partner spotlight with LoginVSI. So Jeff, can't remember, where are you located again?
The good old Bay Area, California, where we're getting tons more rain than we actually need right now.
You look like you're living in a rainforest. Well, not actually.
Yeah, no, it's as I always say, be careful what you wish for, so we're getting more than enough rain than we need right now.
Yeah, it's challenging.
But nobody wants to hear us complain in California,
It is a pretty temperate climate, I will say. Outside of the fog in San Francisco, gets pretty cold when I'm there.
Oh, what's that saying? The coldest summer I ever, or the coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco.
Yeah, Mark Twain. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that, and I tend to forget my jacket when I'm out there.
Oh yeah.
All right, well, I think we've got most everyone in the room, so we're going to go ahead and kick off. Once again, welcome to XenTegra's Partner Spotlight for the week. We appreciate everybody joining us, and we're going to get things started. Come on. That is if my PowerPoint will, oh, well, that's fun. If my PowerPoint will cooperate with me. All right. Thanks everybody for joining. We at XenTegra are giving away 2 Broncos this year. So how can you get involved with that? How can you find out the details? Check out workhasnoboundaries.com. That's core to our beliefs here as an end user compute focused company. We believe that work happens everywhere around the world, home, coffee shops, lots of different places. So we truly believe that you can be productive, and we've shown that during the pandemic. To celebrate that, we're giving away 2 Broncos this year, 2 different regions and locations. Pretty easy to get signed up and involved. Check out workhasnoboundaries.com. Real quickly, who is XenTegra? Well, we are a value-added reseller, and we really try hard to add value. There's a lot of value-added resellers in name out in the marketplace, but we try to add true value for our customer. One of the ways that we do that is education, webinars, workshops, and events like the one you're participating in today. That's one of the ways that we try to add value. We try to subsidize education through conference passes and through hosting events and hands-on labs for our customers. And we also are a service provider. So we come alongside our customers with professional services, managed services. And at the end of the day, we work with all of our partners to bring together best of breed solutions. Oftentimes our customers need more than just one software product to solve a problem. It's going to be a suite of different technologies put together into a cohesive solution. And so that's what we aim to deliver for our customers is total solutions. A little bit about us. We do focus in the end user compute space. We are an international company these days. We launched our Canadian division a couple of years ago, and I'm also proud to announce that we have recently opened operations in India. True international presence, still focused in end user compute across all sorts of technologies. One of the other ways that we try to add value, we offer complimentary assessments for our technology partners. So you see some of the logos down at the bottom of the screen, and we have free engagement. So if you've never worked with us before, it's a great way to get to know us and know our bench of expertise. One of the things that we like to tout is the fact that we've got over 700, although I think that statistic's old. I think it's over 900 years worth of Citrix experience within the company. We've got a growing amount of VMware experience as well. And so we would love to help you. And those complimentary assessments are a great way to get to know our team and understand what our capabilities look like. So who am I? Who's talking at you on this webinar? Well, my name is Phil Sellers. I'm one of the solutions architects here. And that's a fancy title to say that I help on the pre-sales side. I help with education. We work with our customers to create solutions and to bring together all of our technology partners to solve the problems that our customers have. Been in the industry about 25 years, and that makes me feel old. Before I came to XenTegra, I was on the customer side for most of my career. Worked different roles from systems administrator up to director of infrastructure for an insurance company. We had lots and lots of sites, data centers, cloud presence. It's been a fun ride, and it's taken some unexpected turns, including opportunities to speak, write a book, doing some other things like our podcasts and things here at XenTegra as well. So fun fact, I lived in Myrtle Beach, the golf capital of the world, but I never learned to golf. So I think that's an opportunity missed now that I'm on the sales side, honestly. Enough about me. Today's about our partner, and today's partner is LoginVSI. I do want to remind you that we do partner spotlights just about every Wednesday at 1 p.m. So please check out XenTegra.com for upcoming partner spotlights. But today we want to put the spotlight on LoginVSI. They are gracious enough to be giving away a HomePod to one of the participants from today's partner spotlight. So we're gonna give that away after today's session. You'll be notified by email, and all you had to do is show up. So you're already entered if you're in the room. Without further ado, though, I'm going to turn it over to Blair from LoginVSI. Let you guys introduce yourselves, and we'll get started.
Thanks, Philip. And thanks everybody for joining today. I'll share my screen real quick. And Philip, if you could let me know that you see it, then I'll start with my introduction.
We are clear. We can see it.
Right on. Thanks. So my name is Blair Parkhill. I've been with LoginVSI for about 8 years now. I have spent probably along with you, Philip, about 25 years in customer-focused solutions engineering, going from backup solutions through high-end array storage solutions around Exchange and eventually into VDI. I currently hold the role of Director of Products here for LoginVSI, as well as strategic technical partnerships with many of the companies that you're very familiar with today. And we've been a longtime partner of XenTegra as well. So thanks for this opportunity. Lately, I've been spending a lot of time working with Microsoft on their Azure Virtual Desktop program, doing a bunch of testing for them, with them. I'll share some of that information with you today because I think we're all sniffing around the cloud lately and seeing what we can do to kind of extend the solutions that we have to kind of make ourselves more capable for a lot of the challenges that life throws our way, and we need to be pretty flexible and adaptive too. So we'll cover that in today's presentation, but for now, let me hand it over to Jeff for his intro.
Off mute. Good afternoon, everybody. Jeff Tebow here. I've been with LoginVSI now for actually just coming up on a year. Prior to my joining LoginVSI, I've spent the last 20 plus years in the EUC VDI space, more specifically around the actual thin client computing, and learned of actually LoginVSI through my time and tenure at iGel. I myself support all of our North America channel partners. So the illustrious folks here at XenTegra are one of our top focused strategic partners, and glad that we could be on today.
Thanks, Jeff. Well, cool. Yep, we have a lot of overlap over the years with each other. What I'd like to do is just quickly take you through our Login Enterprise platform, teach you a little bit or help you understand what it is that we do if you haven't heard of us. Also, I do have a small demo prepared. So we'll go through some slides that can help you figure out where we fit, and then I'll kind of show you the goods. Let's see, using your voting tools that you have, I believe we have those voting tools. If I'm not mistaken, I would love to know if anybody has heard, or how many of you have heard of LoginVSI. Philip, do we have voting tools?
I don't know that we've got voting tools, but let's do raise hand. That's in the bottom of the window.
I see, yeah.
We got a couple for sure.
Yeah, I'll raise my hand too.
Yeah, I should raise mine. So it looks like we've got quite a few people who are new to you guys.
Yep, cool, good. Well, even if you had heard of us, let's go back. If you have heard of us, if you haven't heard anything within the last few years, we have made a very big change with respect to the products that we offer. If I date myself back to what we call legacy VSI or old LoginVSI product, we were known as the standard in benchmarking VDI, and it's been that way for a very long time. But we've kind of taken things way beyond just benchmarking. But using the technology that we brought to light to do many other incredible things, and we'll take a look at that. But some of the problems and areas that we're trying to build these solutions for have to do with these three kind of verticals, or not verticals, but these three areas. One is hybrid work, right? It's not that we're doing the same types of on-premises solutions that we were doing 3, 4, or 5 years ago and beyond. Right, we used to buy a bunch of gear, put it in a lab, configure it, and us as IT administrators and architects had to be very good about deploying that, optimizing that, figuring out how to solve problems rather quickly, and all of that was kind of in our domain basically, and not just our networking domain, but within our walls. With the we own the power, everything. And it's really changed, and obviously with the pandemic, this was forced upon many of us that we have to support more of a hybrid work environment where workers are working remotely. And me, for example, I work from Costa Rica. I also work from a few different places in the United States, and it's pretty much seamless being able to kind of balance between each one, but still always be connected. And it's important for me as an IT geek to always have a good experience when it comes to that remote work. So making sure that whether your workers are on-prem or working remotely, giving them the experience that keeps them productive is huge. And as we kind of step out of the pandemic and back into the potential for going back into the office, we're seeing a lot of folks saying, hey, I'd still rather work remote, and a lot of us still are. So we do need to support that, which basically breaks down the walls of our IT environments today, right? And exposes them or opens them up to more. Now, that brings us to IT modernization. So are we going to open ourselves up to the cloud and start to kind of go beyond just our walls again? And what we're seeing is this IT modernization is not only kind of caused by this need to expand outward beyond our walls, but IT modernization also takes into account things like conferencing software. It takes into account, new operating system updates. I'm going from Windows 10 to Windows 11, for example. I mean, all of these things are changing. And what that does is that drives a lot of costs that we weren't planning for, or it's driving more costs that we weren't planning for within a certain period of time. And these are all, stats from well-known, analysts in the industry, and Gartner in this middle one is certainly very well known. And they're saying 70% of the enterprises they talk to are exceeding their budgets. I'll bring up here in a little bit why that's important and how we can help. And then employee experience. Only 30% of employees said that their experience in technology exceeds their expectations. Now, you're actually watching my presentation on a Windows 365 machine that's hosted out of a data center that Microsoft has, right? A lot of us are, while I'm really proud of myself for taking on new technology like that, I also expose myself to a little issue, right? Like if my network speed isn't great, then, or if my network goes down, I lose access to my productivity machine, right? All of these things kind of contribute to that experience. And there are some things that we can do to make sure that that's always in good shape. And I'll also cover things like that here in the presentation. Now, we've seen this evolution happen. If you're like Phil, Jeff, and I, Phil must be doing some coloring because he's not so gray in the beard, but I know he's been doing this for a while. Me, I've been doing it for quite some time, and I've seen all of this stuff, right? Remote PC access, things like remote applications. Even when my mom was doing kind of technology for the company that she started, she was doing Citrix published applications, right? I mean, this stuff's been around forever. But we've seen this kind of go from published apps to published desktops. And then we were like, okay, is the world ready for VDI? Is technology ready for it? And now we've kind of shifted all the way to the right where we're doing this from the cloud, and it's becoming more and more seamless. And, we don't, we don't even stop to think about, hey, I'm using an all SaaS application, right? It's not even something I install on my servers anymore. And we're all good with it, right? It's really been pretty easy for us to kind of manage, and it's not unexpected to be able to have to use those in our day-to-day practices. Office 365, for example, there's just so many examples of this and how things have shifted. But I think what we're seeing and where we are in this roadmap is not all on-prem anymore. We're not all cloud yet. We're in between. And if you think about it, if you have a set of tools, you don't just use one tool all the time. You kind of always use all of them in some mix. And I think hybrid is here to stay, which makes things a little more complex, right? Because now we're managing on-prem and cloud. So we need to get really good at what we do. And again, I'd like to think that we do help with that in some way. Now, a couple things that make Login Enterprise, which is our enterprise platform that we sell and support here at LoginVSI. Login Enterprise is a product that's been on the market for about 5 years now. Some really good development that's brought us to solve a number of problems. One of those problems being that a lot of the enterprises we talk to really would like some help with the types of things that we provide. But the first question is, hey, are you going to add another agent to my image? Nothing against the agents that we install on these images. They do serve a purpose and have some value, but it does consume valuable resources in all of these user VMs or even applications where you have a session and an agent's attached to that session. It's going to eat up a lot of the costs that you're using to support those users. And so our number one, thing is that, hey, we're agentless. We don't install anything in your image, yet we do have a way to run on any desktop, with our virtual users without that. So I'll explain that in a little more detail later. We mimic real user behavior. So whatever what your human user is doing during their day of work are things that our virtual users can do anytime, anywhere. If you've got bank tellers that are using kind of the finance front ends that they would use on a daily basis, we could do just about everything they do, right? Open their finance app, open a customer account record, change a customer account record, save, all of that stuff are things that our virtual users can do. So this makes us very different because we're not just simulating a login. We're not just simulating open an application. We're actually opening the application, interacting with it, and timing each of these interactions throughout the entire session, right? So if anything changes, we can kind of point at what does that experience change? Is it in milliseconds? Is it in seconds? What's going on here? The thing about looking at this type of ecosystem from the end user's point of view is that's really the one place where you get to see or feel if anything is happening in the infrastructure stack, it's always going to affect that top end, right? So the cool thing is we're looking at everything from that user's perspective. If an application is slow, but the rest of the environment is good, we could tell, right? So again, we'll look more at that. Now, I mentioned benchmarking earlier. We're doing capacity testing, looking at how many, how efficient I can make a system, how fast I can make it, how I can optimize it. All of that comes back to how much can I squeeze out of the cost that I'm putting forward into my solution or my technology stack. So, if I can fit 100 users on a single server, but I optimize that, now I can get 150. I'm a hero, right? Because I've just improved my cost factor for the business. And if I need to support more users later on, it's not going to be a budget impact, right? So being able to determine how that changes over time before you push things into production is going to be big, especially when you're looking at cloud, when that growth is not just a capital expenditure, that you're kind of amortizing over the factor of years, right? These are things that you're paying for every month. And this is what's really biting a lot of people as they're looking at the cloud or moving to the cloud. They'll need another server instance deployed, or maybe 10 new server instances deployed, and that can quickly add up and break your budget very quickly, as you saw a couple slides ago. We do have some really cool tools, and we call it our end user experience score or our EUX score. And what this does is basically characterizes that the responsiveness of that desktop in a very simple and easy to read number between 0 and 10. So if you remember back in the Windows XP, Win 7 days, when you could do properties on my computer and you could open up your performance profile and see how's my GPU, my memory, my CPU, how does that stack up against everybody else? Well, we're doing the very, very similar thing, right? Where we have this EUX score that says, hey, your system is a 7 out of 10. That's pretty good. Your system is a 9 out of 10. That's banging. Your system is a 5 out of 10. Probably not going to make a lot of users happy, right? So we have really easy to read, metrics like that. And, in the future of the product, we'll be able to break down those end user metrics to point at why is my user experience that bad? Kind of sniffing along the root cause analysis type of thing. It's not in the product yet, but keep your eyes open. And then lastly, we work well alongside other tools that you might have. So if you're using ControlUp, for example, we get a lot of questions. Hey, how are you guys different than ControlUp? ControlUp monitors and watches a lot of the infrastructure. They do have some hooks into kind of a real user's experience, right? But what nobody else has is the ability to simulate these users, have them run 24/7 by 365, and always report back on what their experience is like. I kind of like to think of it like an Internet of Things sensor, right? I'm going to put a temperature sensor inside each of the rooms of my house so I can make sure the thermostats are all firing great, right? Now, if those only worked when somebody was in the room, then if I left the house for the day, then I come back to a very cold house, right? The same principle applies to virtual users. If you have a virtual user that's always in the room and constantly checking the temperature and always adjusting it as it needs to be, then that's where we're different from a login enterprise perspective to somebody like ControlUp. So we work very well together when you kind of mesh together this 24/7 by 365 approach, and then take it and look at some of the deeper details that you get with some of these third-party tools. Then it really gives you an ability to be proactive and address and remediate issues much, much faster than you'd be able to if you had to wait for a help desk ticket, for example. So let's see here. I'm going to go to the next slide. I just took a quick peek at the webinar chat. Doesn't look like we have any new ones. Okay,
so we do have one question for you, Blair.
Sure.
So Alan asked, as we're looking at that kind of 100% remote, is IT security easier or more difficult for most companies? What do you see?
That I'm not a security expert, but I can tell you that I am seeing more and more people utilize things like multi-factor authentication with Azure AD and things like that, right? It used to be that that was a complex technology to put forward and required a lot of additional instruments to be able to use, and still is that way today. So While I'm not really a good security expert, I can tell you things like, hey, we work with security, and I am, of course, as a member of my company, I need to make sure that the workspaces that I'm on are secure, and they are. They work with like Intune, for example, to always make sure I'm patched and all that stuff. So I see it maturing, and I see that it's pretty much there. But I think we still have a ways to go, not just with making it completely secure, but also the impact that security causes to the user experience, right? So I don't have a whole lot more to say on the security stuff. Cool.
Appreciate that.
Sure thing. I see you got some more there. Great. Okay, so how does Login Enterprise work? Well, you've got a couple of things to start with. Like, first of all, we support traditional cloud and hybrid VDI environments. I think what we're seeing with this type of technology is that we've all done pretty good in the on-premises world, where everything was on a pretty flat network, or at least within a corporate domain. And it was kind of easier to deploy a lot of these tools. But now that we have things that are going beyond just that on-prem, they're stretching out to the cloud, they're hybrid in a lot of cases. I think it's important to note that our tool set provides for any one of those in between. So the demo you'll see, I have our virtual appliance installed in Azure. I'm testing lots of AVD. We've been doing things like Azure Stack HCI testing, where we have customers that are kind of going beyond those two zones. So we support it all. You can see us using tools like Microsoft Remote Desktop Client, for example. It's a new tool, not a lot of support for those type of connection technologies from an automation point of view, but we have it, right? So we support, pretty wide range of those type of connection technologies, and we use for pre-prod and prod, right? So for pre-production, I might do some scalability, capacity planning, do some testing for optimization. In the production sense, I'm going to, again, stick my virtual users out in the production world, not in large numbers, right? But just think of them, again, like sensors, so that they can report back on what that production experience is like. Since we're deploying as a virtual appliance, it just kind of, click a few buttons, wait a little bit, and you've got everything you need ready to go. So the deployment model is also much more contemporary. And I'm not the sales guy, but we do license by concurrent active users. So if you've got a large shop, we're going to license by the total number of concurrent users. Now, to get Login Enterprise running, you want to define the workload. So what are my users doing? What do I want to simulate those virtual users doing that best represent my real human user population? That's really easy to do. I'll show you that. And then you want to define the locations and environments. So do I just want to test my on-premises solution? Do I have a local data center or regional data centers where I'm connecting to it from all over the world? Well, you can send these virtual users, or have these virtual users log in from anywhere around the world to any location. So these are the kind of things that you define up front as you're building your solution. And then once you have those workloads defined, those connection properties defined, and that kind of stuff, then you can deploy your virtual users against each of those targets. So I could deploy them against a Citrix cloud connection that's going to connect me with a virtual app or a virtual desktop. It could be a multi-session desktop. It could be a pure VDI. It could be persistent, non-persistent, you name it. Those targets are all fair game to us as long as they're running Windows. So, what we'll do is kind of program that from a scheduling perspective and use that to monitor performance or determine capacity of a solution. We can also use this to validate application integrity. So if I do make a change from Windows 10 to Windows 11, I want to make sure that app runs the same on both. I can actually do that update and just have my virtual user bang against that application to make sure it responds the same way. If you're just doing one or two applications, yeah, you could do that on your own. But we have customers that are doing hundreds of applications. So updating an image to a new OS or even patching an OS means that they have to test hundreds of applications. Well, our virtual users can do that for them. And then lastly, analyzing the results is important. Does my capacity change based on performance changes or changes to my OS, for example? Has a network pipe between my location and my data center been impacted, and now I get protocol latencies that are much higher. These are the kind of things that we see with results, and you can trigger on these. So if protocol latency exceeds a certain threshold, I can get an alert for that. So so that's basically how Login Enterprise works. Again, if you're a geek and you like to see things in action, I'll show you that. So I think the important part, if you bring it all back to where we were, 7 years ago as the benchmarking standard, it was all about how much can I fit on a system, right? It's all benchmarking capacity. How far can I push it? But again, we basically have 3 pillars now. Use this to continuously monitor performance. Again, much like an IoT sensor, we'll monitor your apps, we'll monitor your workspaces on a continuous basis. The cool thing about this is a virtual user never does things differently, right? How many of you have been on help desk duty? Users called in and said, hey, my app no longer works. And your first question is, okay, what did you do differently? I didn't do anything differently. Well, no, I didn't do anything differently maybe in the app, but I might have switched wireless networks. I might have just clicked on that simple update button. There's so many things that a user could have done, or I could have opened a much larger file, right? Like I do every day, I just open a larger file. And so it took forever for that thing to load. Virtual users are going to do things the same way every time. So if there's a lag in opening a file, then I know it's not the virtual user doing something different. It's very consistent. And the virtual user also measures operations in milliseconds. So I can see a trend. Maybe it takes 20 milliseconds longer, and then 200 milliseconds longer an hour later, and then 2 seconds longer an hour after that. It's a trend that you can trigger on, and it'll and allow you to kind of go investigate that before that becomes kind of your help desk phone lighting up. So that continuous performance monitoring is a big deal. And then looking at how it impacts costs. Again, going back to the cloud OpEx. As my density of my hosts that I'm hosting my desktops on changes, then it's going to affect my costs. So this helps you to really optimize that and get the best cost, or even plan for the cost before you push to production. And then lastly, just maintaining that capacity. So if I have an OS change, I want to make sure that that capacity isn't impacted too greatly. In a lot of cases, it will be. So how do you know when that happens? Because if you don't do anything about it, users are going to log in after that change and not be so happy. Okay, I covered a lot of this, so I'll just breeze through that and get you to your demo. As I mentioned earlier, we're used by so many different of your technology vendors that you see in the stack. Many of them are listed here. Many of them I work with on a weekly basis, who are interested in how their technology changes are impacting things like density and performance. So they're looking at this before you do. Here's the big thing that I've noticed. All of us, pretty much probably on the phone today too, we all have extensive experience in, hey, I bought this server and I was able to optimize that server to fit 100 VDI sessions on it. And I should be getting about 5 per vCPU or 5 per core, or maybe 10 sessions per core. But what happens when you move all of that to the cloud and now all of that is a black box? And what we're kind of really at a disadvantage for nowadays is we don't know what that scaling capacity looks like. Not to mention the fact that every week you're getting a new instance that's more equipped to handle more of a workload. And sometimes it's the same price. So, I mean, all this stuff is changing under our feet, and you really have to be nimble. And even the vendors are kind of looking at that today as the thing that they want to kind of solve. So, again, performance monitoring, we're looking at things 24/7 by 365 for performance and availability. That virtual user is going to do that, every day, every 10 minutes if you want, every 5 minutes if you want. It's going to detect abnormal behavior. Again, it might be taking a little bit longer than it usually does. It's going to trigger a threshold that I set. It's going to be trending in the wrong direction, but that abnormal behavior is now breaking behavior if you can catch it in time. The idea here is I want to catch that in time, fix it before it becomes a big problem. There are a lot of organizations that we work with where they will have a problem and they'll find out about it hours after the problem exists, right? So the downtime can be impacted huge if you can't catch it early. And that's what the prevent potential failures is all about. You'll see this in my demo. I'm not going to focus too much here, but a few things that you want to kind of, to pay attention to is one, we do give you some insight into geographically, where are these issues? Is this lighting up red in a particular geography? Is it affecting, globally, that kind of thing. On an ongoing basis, I'll show you what the monitoring looks like. And we look at things like latency so you can see, what are some of the drivers that may be impacting my end users. And then lastly, we do provide SLA reports. So if you're being expected to provide a good user experience, and high nines worth of availability, we have these SLA reports that help you to kind of demonstrate to your leadership, hey, we're hitting the mark. Here's some proof that we're hitting the mark and doing a good job, and I'm going to provide that to you every month. So that's a proactive monitoring. Again, cost optimization is all around how does my capacity change over time versus the cost or the spend that I'm applying to that. And I want to be able to track that. I want to be able, here's another thing that I find really important. And, what you're looking at now on the screen might just be something that you'll see us announce in the news here later this week. But we're looking at is things like cost dashboarding. So let me give you an example. You have identified that this change that you need to make for security purposes, I need to install a new tool, Carbon Black, something like that, on my image. I just tested the capacity of my implementation after implementing that security change, and my user capacity per server dropped 50%. Oh my gosh, right? That's a huge issue. I need to kind of escalate this to upper management and say, hey, listen, if you want to maintain good user experience, if you want to maintain, the efficiencies that we have today, you're going to have to spend a little more to kind of get us more horsepower to support this very important security change that you've made. Well, you need proof to bring up the ladder to say, hey, here's where we were before, here's where we are after this change, and this is what we're going to need, right? So you look at these cost dashboards as a way to, fuel that decision, to make that decision much more rapid, and to really provide some credible, information that backs up your request to upper management, because sometimes Excel spreadsheets can be cumbersome and not always, they don't always come with a lot of respect or credibility, right? So we're looking at, this is something that we have in our product, something you can expect to see here in the next few days, is this type of cost tracking that allows you to bring that up the chain and make some of those differences before they become a problem. Here's a couple examples. One is that cost dashboard I was telling you about. The other one is being able to compare before and after. And when you compare before and after, you can see, hey, what was the user experience before? What was the user experience after? Where have I been impacted the most? Is it applications, logons, user experience, or total density, right? All of these things are things that we're looking at from an, a cost perspective. And then lastly, capacity planning. So if you remember VSI from the good old days, this is what, where our roots started. We're going to find out how much capacity you can drive on a system, and we're going to help you to understand how can I tweak and tune this to get the most out of it before I push this out to my production users. So that's what capacity planning is all about. And just some graphs that kind of back that up. But again, I think it's important to show you in demo. So I've taken this corporate presentation and thank you for sitting through me with through that with me. I am substituting for Michael Kent today, and who's our CTO, and he was going to be doing this with you. Since he's not doing it and I'm doing it, I actually jacked up the slides. I threw my own stuff in because I think it's more fun, and I want to show you what some of that looks like, right? So I'm going to show you a few slides of some of the information I've been able to find using my product. And these were two projects that I worked with the product team at Microsoft, the AVD product team at Microsoft. They were very interested in what the impacts were of making certain changes so that they could tell their customers, here's what you can expect. Pretty cool that they chose us to do that. So the first one was comparing Windows 10 to Windows 11. Everybody wants to know what's the impact going to be going from Windows 10 to Windows 11, because in every other version change from Windows, I've had to add more compute resource to that change, right? The next generation of Windows is going to eat up more performance from a processor and memory perspective. Well, check this out. because when we tested Windows 10 on Windows 11 in Azure Virtual Desktop on Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session and compared it to 11 Enterprise Multi-Session, you can see very clearly that actually Windows 10 consumes more CPU than Windows 11. How's that for a surprise, right? I mean, I never would have guessed that. I wouldn't have bet my paycheck that Windows 10 would have been, eating more resources than Windows 11. That just blows my mind. And I think it's really cool. And there's a lot of reasons why that happens. We won't go into here, and this is going to vary for everybody, but in my environment, running a knowledge worker, using the Office suite, browsing the web, we could prove that Windows 10 actually consumed about 8%, or maybe even more than that. It's more like 16% more CPU resources. So really cool what we found out, and that was on a D16 DSV4, I believe. Where we had done this, and we had 24 sessions. So I believe that's about 1.5 users sessions per vCPU. You can see we weren't eating up all the processors, so that's good. You could fit more on there, but pretty interesting discovery. Now we did memory, and actually Windows 11 consumed more memory than Windows 10. But I didn't show that. The other thing I wanted to show you was our EUX score, right? Windows 11 versus Windows 10, you actually get a slightly better user experience on Windows 11. And that's not just the user interface, which is more contemporary. It looks more like Mac, which is definitely one of the better OSs on the market today, right, Philip? And we see that the EUX score for Windows 11 is better. It's almost in line with Windows 10. Again, this breaks convention where you would expect a new operating system to be more aggressive and give less performance if you're running on the same system. In this case, it wasn't. The other thing that you see are logins here in the bottom left. A Windows 10 login took a second longer than a Windows 11 login. That can actually add up. And logins are one of the biggest pains when it comes to production user experience, right? Because we're typically used to hitting the login button and going and get a cup of coffee, right? Coming back, sitting down, and then still waiting for your desktop to be ready for you. So all of these things we were able to look at, and there's a lot of reasons why Windows 11 does better in this case as well. So this was really encouraging to see. This was all done by looking at the capacity planning tools that we have, comparing those two operating systems. Now here's another one. This one was super popular. Hopefully I'm doing good on time. This one was super popular. Cool, thanks, Philip. Everybody wanted to know what's Teams going to do, right? Because a lot of us already knew that based upon practical experience, Teams was eating our lunch. It was important for us to be able to, again, duplicate this with our virtual users, tweak and tune things to see what that impact was looking like. And in this case, this is a really cool one where we're doing it again, D16 DSV4 in Azure, using a multi-session OS, and we're running Teams. And you can see here in the table on the left, the EUX score without Teams, 7.2, great score. With Teams, we dropped 11% to 6.4. Already you're seeing the lag in that experience increase because you have Teams running. CPU utilization, again, big change, 58% to 77%. Memory utilization, big change, 20% greater memory utilization from Teams. But if you look at the user experience over time, these two dips that you see here, that's when all of the users were concurrently running Microsoft Teams, right? So you could see the impact that that has versus what it looks like without Teams. It's just really interesting to see for me. That tells me that if I want to continue with a solution like this, I might have to make an investment to pull up that user experience to make it what it was if I'm going to roll forward with Teams, right? Well, looking at that a little bit deeper, what if you go from a V4 to a V5? And for anybody that's kind of knowledgeable about Azure, you might know that if I move from a D16 DSV4 to a D16 VSV5, it's the same freaking price, right? So if you have an opportunity to boost your performance for free, I mean, number one, you got to make sure that that's the case by testing it. But in this case, we actually improved the user experience by doing a free update on our instances from a V4 to a V5. You can see down here the $660 per month for the both instances. But now with Teams, I can get 24 users per host on a V5 versus 16 on a V4. for free, I basically saved my company some money by doing this kind of testing right in my environment. So you can be a hero with that kind of stuff. This is the kind of stuff that you can find out by doing this type of testing. And again, this was really exciting testing that we were doing to find all of this good stuff out. So those are kind of some of the insights that you get when you're doing testing like this. Now, let's take you over to the product, right? And I'll quickly go through this. I realize we don't have like a ton of time, but let me show you what Login Enterprise looks like. Now, what you basically do is you download the virtual appliance from our website. You deploy it into Xen server, ESX, Azure, Hyper-V, you name it. You can deploy it into it, and you answer a few questions on host name and networking. You press go. You wait 5 minutes, and it's up and running. So you get this web UI that's in front of you after importing that appliance. And you can see that we have some logical groupings here in the home page for the virtual appliance. You have configuration, results, and some of your other stuff. So typically, what we would do when deploying this is we would start with a configuration. We create some virtual user accounts that we could use for our testing. We would then build a number of applications, or in fact, we have a lot of these applications that come with the product already. So if you want to do a knowledge worker, you don't have to build anything. You just use the tools that are in there. We have a knowledge worker application group that you can use, and that knowledge worker application group has all of the Office knowledge worker applications in the correct order that you would need to run a test yourself, right? So you don't have to do any application stuff. The only time you really need to add an application if you have a bespoke application for your, for your enterprise. And that's pretty easy to add. We have a script editor here. So if you want to download the script editor and build your own, totally can do that. We also have script templates. So if you're using things like SAP, Epic, Allscripts, a bunch of those others, then we have a lot of those templates already built for you. So that's the applications. Once you have your user accounts and applications, then last thing is your launchers. Your launchers are basically the machines that are going to be running your Citrix receiver, your VMware, Horizon connector, your RD client connector for AVD. Those launchers are going to run that software, and they're going to simulate that user logging in from that launcher to your target environment. And you can actually assign each of these launchers geographically to a location that you want them to show up on a map, right, for a more global view. We give you details about each of the launcher, what's their uptime, what operating system are they running. If you want a quick peek at what launchers do, you can see here. I've got 3 launchers running a load test. You can see each of the virtual user sessions where they're using Word, they're using Excel, they're making emails. They're watching videos, they're just doing a ton of stuff. So these 3 are just doing a performance test, a capacity test against a D16DS, and they're applying a load to the system. So I can kind of see what that looks like. So, you've basically got all of these virtual users banging on the system concurrently so that you can look at how does this system changed over time? Or, if I make a change, how does this look compared to before and after the change? So these are what your launchers look like. These launchers are running RD client, for example, and a single launcher can support up to 20, 25 sessions, right? So I could do high capacity on them, or I could deploy a launcher in a network closet in a remote location and just have it run singularly there. So that's what the launchers look like. They're pretty easy to deploy. You just take the software from the bottom here, download the launcher software and deploy it, install it, and it will automatically register with the virtual appliance and be ready for use. You can see we also added this in our last release. It's called Universal Web Connector. As you've probably seen, so many of the vendors have new connection technologies that they offer. For example, Microsoft, again, with MSRDC, the remote desktop client. It's a very new connection software, right? We had the old RDP software, but you can't use that for AVD, so they have this new RD client. And it's a hybrid application, which means that it's not just a WinForm that you're interacting with. It's actually a WinForm and a web page smashed together into one. So you can imagine how hard it might be to use that in automation technology. So this Universal Web Connector basically allows us to do things like, hey, I want to use Citrix Cloud. I want to use NetScaler. I want to use RD Client. this type of software allows us to programmatically use those new connection software types. In fact, it also allows us to use multi-factor authentication. So if you want to simulate users connecting in production, but they need to use MFA, Universal Web Connector helps us to achieve that. So it's not a blocking issue for us. So that's what the configuration looks like. After you have those things set up, you're basically going to create a test. And you can see here for my load test, I just say, hey, what's my connection type? Here's the connection, the host connector. This could be a storefront connection URL. This could be a Horizon connection URL. What resource do I want to connect to? In this case, a desktop. And which users and launchers do I want to use? How many users do I want to log in a certain period of time? How long do I want them to run in steady state? And then what's the workload going to look like, right? So that's basically how all of our tests are set up. So we're not going to dive into each one with the limited time that we have. But a load test or a capacity planning test is one that you just click go. It would run the test, stop, and give you a report. For a continuous test, it's like performance monitoring. You just turn it on, and it's like you just turned on a sensor in your home automation. So you can turn on multiple, you can turn on one. We have some customers that have a continuous test running against each of their terminal servers that host an application, and they want to make sure that all of those terminal servers are always firing on all cylinders, and they get an alert anytime one of those terminal servers isn't doing its job. So it's really good at finding those, I'd say, black holes sometimes that we get where you have a server that isn't performing well, so it's not being taxed very heavily, so the load balancers are always sending more its way, right? It's a terrible problem to have, but it's easy to find when you have these kind of tooling. And then the last one is an application test. I mentioned that earlier. If I want to test an application after an OS change, I can fire this application test at it with one user, have it run through one time, and then tell me, do I have any issues, right? So that's how you set it up in just a very brief demo. Now, if I want to look at how are things running right now, I can see I have a load test going. Everybody got logged in out of my 24 users, but one of my virtual users didn't have enough resources to continue running and it failed, right? So there's already a good data point that my logins might have been too aggressive. And then lastly, are all of my apps working well in this load test? You can imagine if I overburden a server, a lot of this stuff is going to fall off and it's going to be bad news, right? So this gives you that information. I'll show you what a test report looks like there. But I mentioned the performance monitor, this sensor per se. So this is the kind of information that you get from these sensors. Are all my applications performing below their thresholds, their trigger thresholds? Or any applications failing, like Microsoft PowerPoint has 2 failures. What happened? Well, I can look at the logs, or I can just look at a screenshot and I can see that for some reason, PowerPoint didn't start in time. I don't see it in the taskbar. Okay, well, maybe the system is too burdened, or my license is not good, or something like that, right? So you can get some quick tools on that. And if I want to see how it's performing over time, I can also see, here's all my thresholds that I have that are triggering these kind of alerts. So I can see how am I kind of stacking up to those thresholds. And if I am trending towards a red line before I get an alert, I might be able to deal with that before it becomes a problem. So you see that with all of these. So that's what this looks like. If I wanted to look deeper at login performance, I can see what that looks like, over the span of 15 minutes, 30 minutes, or an hour. I can see that my actual login performance is getting better over time. That's good news. And if I want to look at round trip protocol latency, I can see that here. I have one launcher running this test. You can see I'm getting some fluctuation here, but it's all under my 15 millisecond latency threshold. Good news, right? If I go above 15 seconds, I'm going to get an email or some kind of alert. And we do snap into tool sets like ServiceNow if you need to create a ticket and take some action. That's what the performance monitoring looks like. The last thing I'm going to show you is what do the load tests look like. So you can look at load tests or, as they're running, but, a couple of things that I'm looking at here. What's my user experience during this test? And what's the VSI max? What's the maximum number of users I can get before my performance degrades to a point where it's no longer good for end users? And this becomes a really important number when you're trying to determine capacity of a system. So you can kind of drive into one of those. You can see here's my end user experience score over the course of the test. You can see that logins are really tough, especially on Windows 10. When I log in a lot of users in a certain period of time, I can see that it's really kind of tough on the system. User experience is not great, but in steady state, things do look much better. And, we're staying, at a pretty good level. I'd consider 6.5 to be a pretty good score for a production user in a standard enterprise. I can look at things a little deeper, like logins, if I want to see how all of the different factors are contributing to my login. Same thing with applications. And this is, again, a big differentiator for us. Let's just look at Excel, for example. I want to see how Excel performs over time. And it's not just starting Excel. I want to see how long does it take to save a file, map out the open window so I can see all of my storage devices, or open an Excel document. I could even time how long it creates me to create a row, add a bunch of values, do a lookup, create a sum value. I could wrap a timer around any one of those things. And that's just an example of, things that we could do with your own bespoke applications. So I realize this is just kind of a quick taste of everything. And, we're absolutely, happy to dive in further with you if you would like. We can certainly set something up, and you can request a demo on our website. But that's basically what you're looking at from our product's perspective. Again, it does a lot more things that you may, not have been aware of. It definitely will help you and your organization deliver reliable and predictable results. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Philip and Jeff. You guys can kind of take it from here. I'll take a drink of water. Hopefully I've whet the appetite of those folks that were joining us today. And I'm always here, b.parkhill@loginvsi.com if you'd like to chat with me. Philip, back to you. Jeff, back to you.
Well, we appreciate it very much, Blair. I learned things today. I love the saying, you measure what matters to you. And this very much fits in that category. If you don't know what your baselines look like, if you don't have some sort of objective numbers, how do you know whether you're making things better or worse for your users? So love what you guys are doing in this space. Jeff,
and if I could just maybe add on to that, Philip, just to let folks know on the call, if you like what you saw here, stay tuned. In the next couple of days, we're actually going to be having a major launch to our Login Enterprise there, where we're going to be adding some more dashboards in there that's centered around cost optimization of your performance monitoring and capacity planning as well too. So stay tuned for that. As Blair mentioned, if you guys want to get a demo, you can reach out to any of your XenTegra teammates there. They can get a hold of us there, and we'd be more than happy to do a demo for you folks.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do want to remind everybody, we are giving away a home pod. So after today's webinar, Jeff and Blair are going to draw a lucky name out of a hat, and we'll let you know who gets to bring that baby home. We do appreciate them sharing everything with us today. And again, there's so much more in Login Enterprise. So we do encourage you, if you're interested, reach out to us. If you don't have another way of getting in touch, sales@XenTegra.com will get you in touch with your client exec. We do appreciate everybody joining in. One last reminder for our Work Has No Boundaries giveaway. I want you to be able to get in on that. If you do have more questions for Jeff and Blair, feel free to put them in the Q&A. We'll follow up by email after today's session, and we'll get those answered. My email address is also philip.sellers@XenTegra.com, Philip with 1 L. If you have a question, feel free to send it to me and we'll get it answered for you. Most of all, thank you for your time today. Thank you for listening. I really enjoyed the session. Hope you did as well. And thank you to Jeff and Blair. We appreciate you guys very much.
Thank you.
You too, man.
Have a great day, everyone.
See ya.
Bye-bye.